It was like, close your eyes and pretend you're on your deathbed and you're like 89 years old, and think about all the regrets you had in life about not taking the decisions you wanted to take or not saying what you wanted to say, and now open your eyes. It's like you have a second chance. And I embody that. I try my best to embody that, to live my life without any regrets in terms of taking risks.
Welcome to Bangladeshi Trailblazers podcast. I'm your host, Tasnim Hassan. In today's episode, as I mentioned, we will be talking about real estate in New York. And to do this, we have somebody who has been working on creating content focused on real estate. And that's exactly what I found was very different, because I haven't ever come across people who talk about real estate and create content around it. So in order to get to know his journey, let us get into a conversation with Mo and find out how did he start off with his journey. Hi, Mo, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for actually making the time to do this.
Of course.
How has your week been so far?
Week's been busy, God bless. I can't complain. I'll usually always rather stay busy than bored or broke. So busy is good. Busy for me is always good. If at the end of the day I feel tired, I feel blessed. I'm like, hey, you know what? At least it means I have a lot of stuff to do. I have a lot of transactions going on. I have clients I'm working with that want to work with me too. So far, so good.
So today's episode is focused on real estate and the content that you create around it, right?
Yes.
Very interested to know about how you started off. And to do that,
Sure.
I'm giving you the floor to talk about yourself and tell our viewers about yourself.
Yeah, sure thing. So I have worked in the corporate and startup space for almost a decade.
Mm-hmm.
I was in, tech sales, software sales, and then my last job was at a real estate fund in Midtown in New York. It's an area in New York City that I was at for almost a year. And, I had, up until then, I had always sort of been curious about real estate. It definitely wasn't something that was much of a passion. And even up until then, for me, it was more so just a way to invest in real estate. I was just like, hey, I made decent money over the last several years, and I was like, okay, let me see what I can do with it. I knew I didn't want to put it in the stock market because I just didn't know enough about it. So I was like, hey, you know what? Real estate seems decent. Let's see what happens. In late 2019, I started investing in real estate. It was actually my first tenant at the time. I had that actually I would say sparked my passion in real estate in life. So it was like I had started investing in properties mainly for the purpose of just investing, right? It was like a very numbers approach, numbers driven thing. I wasn't really like, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I was like, hey, I have some money. Let me put it to work. Let me put it somewhere, right? And then when I acquired my first property, it was like I told my broker at the time that when we're interviewing tenants and things like that, let's make sure that it's a good income, good credit score here in America. Every person that has a social security number has a credit score to show the banks show landlords, show everyone how good of a borrower you are, or how good of a basically person you are when it comes to paying your bills. So the better the credit score, the better the credit profile, the better the credit rating. So I told my broker, hey, certain income, certain credit score, anything below this threshold, don't bother. I really don't want it, because at the time I was looking at it from a perspective of someone that was investing in real estate, and I really didn't want to deal with the headache of dealing with people that weren't paying on time, stuff like that. So I was like, at that time it made sense, and it still makes sense for me. So a couple of weeks later, my broker sends me an application of a tenant that, he was like, his credit score is not where it needs to be, but his income is decent. And it's mainly because he doesn't have good credit history.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, why doesn't he have good credit history? He's like, well, he just moved to the country a couple of years ago. So he's a new immigrant, and he moved here to work, and he's working pretty good. He's making decent income. So I was like, all right, let me at least talk to the guy, see what's going on. So I started talking to him, and I realized while I was talking to him, this light bulb was going off in my head. And, this guy was telling me how he moved here with his family a couple of years ago. He moved to New York. Obviously he moved here to work. He didn't move here just to sit around and get government money, right? So he moved here to work. He wanted a better life for his kids. And he was upset that even though his income was there, his credit score wasn't good enough for, finding a place in a good area. And in America, the area that you live in, the neighborhood that you live in is what's going to determine the school district that you're a part of. So if you have kids, right? If you have kids, for people that might not know, the listeners, if you have kids, the house, the area that you buy the house in will dictate what school they get to go. And in America, like school ratings are all over the place. So if you're in a better area, you automatically get access to a better school district, vis-a-vis your kids will go to a better school. And he was telling me about how it was so difficult for him to, get his kids into a good school district because of his credit situation. And like this light bulb started going off in my head because, even though he was in Bengali, like we hear about a lot in the Bangladeshi community, right? Like people will move here, you'd be working for a couple of years, but their credit score isn't where it needs to be because credit takes time to build, right? So the longer you have credit history in America, the better your credit score is, assuming you pay your bills on time. So I was like, okay, let me take a chance with this guy. And I was, he's been one of my best tenants since, always paid on time. And, I'm still turning a profit. Like I'm still making money. Right. And I realized like, hey, this is exactly what I want to be doing. Like this is the industry that I want to be in. Right. And for me, I was never certain about like what that might look like in the industry itself, but I knew I wanted to be in real estate. And I said, hey, you know what, this is where I belong. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing here, but this is exactly where I belong. So after that, I took a short while after that, I took the job at the real estate fund because I just wanted to see how these guys were doing it. And this was like a firm that had like comparatively, it was smaller to the rest of the companies that you might have heard of, but it had like $1.5 billion market fund. So it was like, it was a real estate fund that I joined mainly just so I can like learn more about what was going on, like how the other companies were doing it. And almost a year in, I realized like these guys aren't really doing anything that different, right? They're using the same formulas I've used. They're looking at the same sort of spreadsheets that I can also maneuver and figure out myself. They just have more zeros. They just have more money, and that's it. So I was like, I could do this, right? I was like, I could always figure this out myself, right? All I need is extra zeros. So, at that point, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take the risk. I'm going to go into real estate full time. And the way to do that, at least the easiest way to do that here in New York or even in America, is just to get your real estate license. You study for a while and then you pass the exam and then you get your real estate license and boom, you can start working on transactions. So I got my license late 2021. I'm about to hit 2 years now. And since then, it's been a wild ride. I mean, I'm learning quite a lot. I'm getting involved in different types of transactions, residential, commercials as well. And, it's all playing into like what my big long-term goal is, which is to eventually have my own real estate fund, right? And it's incredibly rewarding, even though it's a lot of hard work. Like I'm working more now than I've ever worked in my life. But it's true. Like when you're really passionate about something, when you feel like you found your life's calling, it doesn't really feel like work, right? And I find myself utilizing all those skills that I've learned over my last like several jobs into what I'm doing now. And now you're just being more intentional with things, right? When I interact with people, when I interact with other people in the industry, when I interact with someone like yourself and people listening too, it's like, I know this is what I want to be doing, or this is the industry I want to be in for the rest of my life. So you typically will be more thorough when you do things, and you'll be able to go a lot deeper. And like a side effect of that is you just end up working more, but it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like work. Like you will get physically tired before you get mentally exhausted, right? And that's where I'm at now. So like, go back to your question of like, how's my week going? It's incredibly exhausting, but incredibly rewarding too.
But, I mean, you're doing what you like. So I think at the end of the day, it kind of like, it compensates at the end of the day.
It compensates, but I'm doing what I love.
Exactly. Because you're doing something that you love, it just kind of balances out. So I want to know, like, what kind of areas are you covering right now within New York City right now for real estate?
Sure. So New York City is made up of 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx, Staten Island, Queens. Besides Staten Island, I cover the other boroughs mainly because Staten Island, it's totally separated. You have to take a bridge to get there. I also cover Long Island. For me, I tell my clients the same thing. It's like, if you're serious, I'm serious, right? So if there's enough, usually for the transaction sides that are here in New York, it would behoove you to be able to cover different areas and do the work and do the research to understand like what your clients' needs are. And for all my clients, if my clients are serious enough, I'm willing to operate in different areas. So I'm not really exclusive to one particular region or anything, even in the city.
Great. I mean, how has the experience been like? Because what I have heard is like, when I was there in the US, I used to hear from people that I knew. They said that Long Island was more of an up and coming neighborhood for families. Whereas, Queens is more like it's a more settled neighborhood. But Long Island was more like, it was like people were starting to move there right now.
Sure,
How
sure.
do you think the transition has been happening, especially post-COVID? How
Yeah,
was it pre-COVID and how was it post-COVID?
yeah. So pre-COVID, I'll be honest, I really can't talk to about that much because I
Mhm.
wasn't licensed at that point. Through COVID, I mean, every, every market is so unique, right? There's always people moving into Long Island because
Mhm.
usually the trajectory is people will, immigrate or move to New York City. They'll be in like inner city and then they'll move to outer boroughs like Queens, Bronx, and then eventually keep moving out. So you'll find like areas like Queens that are more mature, you typically won't get as much space. And obviously, as like, people grow older and they have larger families, they typically will want more space. So that's when you start to see people shifting into Long Island. Long
Mhm.
Island itself is huge. There's Nassau County and then there's Suffolk
Yes.
County.
Yeah.
These are huge. It'll take you more than you'll take 2.5 hours to drive from one point to another point, and that's like that's if there's no traffic. And but it also includes like the tip top of Long Island. It might take a lot longer too, but there's a lot more land there. Of course, taxes are higher,
Mhm.
but usually you'll find people that they're moving from the city into Long Island because they want the open space. They don't want to feel like they're cramped inside like even a separated a detached house, whatever it is. It's still these are all built like in the 40s, 50s, things like that. So they're all built a little bit smaller.
Mhm.
So people will typically be okay with moving a little bit further out of the city just to get some more space. And of course, it's just cheaper there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the things and dynamics are changing right now, right? As well, like
Hmm.
especially post COVID, I think the real estate market. I've been reading upon it. I think it has changed quite a bit as well, right? Especially with
Hmm.
whatever's going on right now in terms of the economic crisis or the kind of economic status that we're at. Right?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah. I
you see?
mean,
How do you see buyers' confidence levels be at? If you had to rate it from 0 to 10 now to purchase homes, how do you see that?
yeah, sure, sure. And you know what? It varies so much, man. Like I think like very open-ended question like that. Like there's never really any like direct answer for it, right? Because every market to market is so different. Like the market in Queens, for example, depends on like what areas you're looking at in Queens, as well as what kind of property types you're looking at too. So let's say, for example, you're looking at a multifamily house, so like anywhere a house that has anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe even more apartments in the building itself. That market has gotten a little bit softer, right? Because yeah, with buyer financing for those, oftentimes you might have to get commercial financing, and that it just costs more money. When you look into like Long Island, different pockets of Long Island are still very aggressive. There's still bidding wars. There's still homes that are being sold for much over asking. The reason for that is like very simple, like supply and demand, right? Like if it gets more expensive to buy housing, buyer demand is of course affected, but supply is also affected too, right? Because then you have people that would have sold because they bought a few years ago, but now they're not selling because, well, hey, if they sell their house, they're going to have to buy another house, obviously, and to buy that other house, it costs more money, and their payment is also higher, and then they're going to end up with a smaller house too. So like it doesn't really make any sense. That's why buyers are getting squeezed from both sides, right? The government's making the interest rates higher, so it's getting more expensive to borrow money, and then supply is also like shrinking too. So it's getting shrunk. The demand is getting squeezed on both sides.
Mhm, mhm. Definitely, and I do read upon that quite a bit. So, interested to know, for example, from your perspective, what are the
Mhm.
top 5 things that you would want home owners or few potential home buyers to
Mhm.
consider or look into when they're looking out for homes? Because there's so much out there, right? Sometimes we know
Yeah, yeah,
people who don't even know what they are expecting. So, what are the top
yeah, yeah,
things that you want to tell them?
yeah. Sure. So I guess it really depends on what your goals are, what your priorities are. So like, there's no really like top 3 things or top 5 things to keep in mind when you're house shopping.
Mhm.
First, I would say start out with what you're trying to accomplish, right? So if you tell me, hey, we want to move to a different school district because of my family or my kids, whatever it is,
Mhm.
okay, great. So that means neighborhood is the most important thing. And then you sort of work your way backwards from like budget and let's say how much time you need and when you'd like to do it. For example, if you say, hey, school district is most important, then neighborhood is obviously important, but so is your timeline, right? You want to buy something or you want to sell something before summer's over because then school's going to start and then it's going to be like, maybe you don't want to move your kids out of a school in the middle of the school year, right? People don't usually want to do that.
Mhm.
So it does vary. It does vary. The advice I give all my clients is the same, which is look, when you're buying or selling, actually mainly when you're buying, there's three things, right? There's property, price, and location. And you can only have two out of those three. So if you find something that's the right price, and the right location, the property condition might not be what you wanted, or the style might not be how you wanted. You find the right property at the right price, it's not going to be in the right location that you want it at. So you have to decide like which one you're open to compromising on. And my responsibility is to help you get to where you are, to where the market is, and just bridge that gap a little bit, right? And to help you come back to, or help you adjust expectations to where market reality and your expectations are matching.
Definitely. And moving on further, I wanted to ask you, like, you do create content focused on real estate. So how did you start off with that? And what kind of structure or content planning do you do? Because there's so much to talk about in terms of real estate, right? The clauses, things that when they're signing contracts, they need to be mindful of, right? So I see that you create content around those. So walk us through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, like the thing to keep in mind is like I love doing this stuff, right? So I love talking about real estate. I love talking to people about real estate. So it just felt like a natural step in the right direction. I also knew that content, or like putting out digital content on social media platforms, or even like on the web, for example, with my blog and website, stuff like that, that is probably the cheapest way for a business to put themselves out there in front of potential customers, right? Because as an entrepreneur, like you're looking for activities that will help drive the deepest and largest impact at the lowest cost. Doing stuff like that costs me nothing except my time. And at this stage of my business, that's okay. That's okay for me for right now. I'm slowly getting to that stage where I might think about hiring people to assist me with those. But obviously, my face, my voice, my personality still needs to be on camera. And going back to like how I started and how far I've come so far and where I'm planning on going, I just started making YouTube videos. Like it was really straightforward. I was like, you know what? I really like talking about this topic, and you know what? 3 people have asked me about it over the last couple of months. It means people want answers for this, right? So my rule of thumb is if one person is asking me, then 10 people have thought about it, but they just didn't ask me. So most of my content will usually come from stuff like that. Or if someone asks me a question and I'm like, oh, I actually don't know the answer to that, or hey, you know what? That's actually a really good question. Let me write it down, and then I'll make a video about it. In terms of the content about like the different neighborhoods and stuff like that, to me, that's just like a challenge for myself. Is like, real estate is so exciting, right? There's so many like different like, being in the business of real estate means that you're in the business of literally everything, right? So for me, like learning about what goes on behind how city politics and city real estate developers, things like that go hand in hand, and learning about the history behind certain things and why variations or variances were approved for X, Y, and Z purposes to, at the end of the day, help, local residents, New York City residents, it's just like really cool to me, right? So I love talking about that stuff. And what really helps me as from a business perspective is when people see that, they just think, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, right? Like, and most of the time it's because I've done the research, right? Like I've studied it. I love reading about it. I love knowing about it. That's why I love to be able to explain it. What's important is to be able to explain it in a way that actually makes sense for the regular person, for the common person. That's where I see a lot of people struggling, and of course struggling to even put out like any form of content. But I don't know. It's a muscle. It's a muscle you need to work on. And like if you're going to be camera shy, that's one thing. But just like anything else, it's a muscle. You work on it, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger the more you do it.
Definitely. And where do you see, like, for example, like this is my observation. I've not seen any real estate personality who has been creating content based off of that, right? It was yours that kind of I came across, and then I was like, okay, this is very unique. So where do you see content creation heading towards with the introduction of AI and with digital platforms getting better and bigger right now? Where do you see that going as a person who's focused on real estate content creation?
You know what? I really don't have an answer to that question. I mean, if I had to guess, if I really had to guess, I'd say because content creation is so like unique to the creators, like personality and the style, like there are other real estate people that are also putting out content. I mean, but me talking about one thing and them talking about the same thing might be delivered in 2 completely different perspectives, right? I really like, in terms of like the AI stuff, I honestly have to like it. It makes it a little bit easier maybe to write stuff out and do things, but I feel like, like I still haven't figured out a way for that to fit into the puzzle of like content creation, because at the end of the day, like I have to be the one in video, in front of the camera, right? Or else people are going to be like, who is this? But that's, it comes with the territory. I could say maybe AI is helping with like video editing, but I haven't figured it out. And, there's also like a style to everything you do. It's like asking an artist, like, how do you feel if AI were to, paint on a canvas for you? Like it's the same, but it's not really the same. There's a deep level of there's a deeper level of investment when it comes to like an art, like a canvas, painting on canvas versus like a picture, right? There's like layers to it that I think AI probably can't recreate as much, because you need that human element, you need that human style to it that'll resonate with other humans too. I mean, we look at an AI picture or something like that, we can tell something's off, right? But I don't know. I think it's such an abstract question. We'll get an abstract answer like I just gave.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I'm not looking for a concrete answer at all, because sometimes I feel like you can be open-ended, it can be a discussion, it could be very constructive.
Of course.
Well, right? Moving on further to your career, what have you focused on, like in the next 5 years? How do you see the real estate industry pan out, within New York? Because when we talk about real estate, there can be like so many things that we can talk about right now. What are some of the top things in your head going on right now? If I would ask you, like, tell me about the 5 top things that's very important for you.
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of different things, right? I think for me, within the next 5 years, I would have probably have my own real estate fund and start investing in projects and opening up investments to retail investors to come in and partner up and get a lot of those tax benefits that people here can get if you invest in real estate as a partner, or even like own your own property. That's where I see myself going, investing in individual transactions and individual deals. Mm-hmm. In terms of the market overall, I do probably feel like within 5 years, I think interest rates are going to calm down quite a bit. I think definitely within the next 2 years, interest rates are going to start slowly trickling back down. And then we'll see an increase in activity, transactions, and a little bit more of a real estate boom coming back on, which is something I'm super excited by, right? I mean, for me, like, being in this kind of market now, don't let anyone fool you. Like, it's very difficult, right? Especially in America. I don't know the rest of the world. But the way interest rates are right now, like, a lot of things just don't make sense. You have to get really, really creative to find value in any kind of opportunity, right? Because otherwise it's too expensive to borrow money, and no one really wants to, it doesn't really make any sense to facilitate any transaction in all cash. I'd rather I hold on to the money myself. But what I am telling myself is whenever we go to like a low cycle like this, usually people that are on the sidelines, the weaker people that really shouldn't have been there, that the economy or the market shouldn't have supported being there, will start to sizzle out. We see it like once every 10 years, right? There's always some kind of a market slowdown, which at this point in my life, I think is good, because I know once we recover from that, God willing, if I've done the work and the consistency and, been able to deliver the results, I'll come out stronger for it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And moving further, I wanted to ask you, like, what are the kind of important clauses that, for example, potential home buyers need to be very, very focused on? Because there's so much out there when they're looking into contracts, when they're going to finally sign the papers.
Sure.
I did see some of your content stating a few clauses and the importance of those, right?
Sure.
So what do you think are some of the top clauses that they need to be mindful of in order to have a good deal and to make sure that everything is in place?
Yeah, of course. So obviously appraisal contingency is, I would say, really important, especially for someone that's buying a house for the very first time with a bank loan. In America, an appraisal is basically when, let's say you're buying a property, it's being sold for $100,000 and you offer $110,000. If the bank appraises it at $110,000, that means it's the bank's valuation, the official valuation that says, okay, this property is worth $110,000. So we will give you a loan for that amount minus whatever down payment and anything you've given. Of course, make sure you have that appraisal contingency in there, because if you have that in there and for whatever reason the final bank valuation doesn't come out as matched, at least you have some protection there too. The second thing as well is, closing timeline in terms of like keeping your closing schedule open, keep it a little bit flexible for you and the seller. Obviously, whenever we are in the contract stage, everyone wants it to close as soon as possible, ideally, because everyone wants their money. People want their house, people want their money. But there are unique instances. For example, right now, what I'm seeing is People are open to hearing offers that are flexible closing because it's going to be October soon. Then we have, by the time you get the bank approval, it's November, it's Thanksgiving year, and then we have Christmas. So usually like last 2 weeks of November and like December, like no, it's really difficult to get any transactions done because, attorneys will be out, people will be out, everyone will be traveling or going home to their families, stuff like that. So definitely make sure you have that in there. Also an inspection contingency. It's not really a clause in the contract. It's more so comes before the contract. But if you have an inspection contingency, this will basically allow you to make sure you do your due diligence if your offer is accepted. So if they say, okay, we're going to take your offer, then you have a couple of days to hire a house inspector, go through the inspection process, look at the house from A to Z, make sure everything's okay. And of course, if a house has been lived in for a couple of years, like it's normal to find regular things. Like I was at an inspection for my client this morning. We found like the door was loose and, there was some bathroom issues here and there, but it's like if the house is lived in, that's expected, especially if there's like a family or a large group of people living there. It's part of the process, but it gives you as the buyer peace of mind to know upfront, okay, what do I need to get done? And what are deal breakers for me? From that point, you can then go back and say, okay, we still want the house, but we want to do this kind of a price adjustment or this kind of a renegotiation, whatever it is. Thankfully, it doesn't happen too often, assuming the seller and the seller's agent have been upfront most of the time. But it does happen, and it's like an extra layer of protection for the buyer.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's very, very informative. That would be something that even I would have known about. I'm not very good with the rules and the regulations and the causes that we need to be mindful of. So thank you so much. And I hope our viewers are going to, benefit from this information, right? Last question that I have for you is, what does Mo do when he is not doing, his real estate work?
When I'm not doing this, that's a tough question because everything I do is real estate. But I do a couple of other things too, right?
Okay.
So I love to work out, I love to run. So I'm usually running in the early mornings. If you follow me on social media, Closed by Mo, you'll see me posting there. I'm training for my pilot's license. So you see my graduate school certificate over there. Yeah. And then I mean, you can see all my stuff here, actually, since people see the videos, so you'll see my books. I love to read. I have a typewriter. I have my journal there. It's a little bit of a mess because I'm shifting offices.
You have a typewriter?
But I love to. Yeah, and it works. It works. One of my attorney friends gave that to me. Yeah, it's from like the 80s or something. Cool. But I mean, I love to read, love to write, love to just keep moving, man. I told myself, I did an exercise when I was in my last year of college, and it was like, this is when this exercise was like brand new, or like I just heard about it. It was like, close your eyes and pretend you're on your deathbed and you're like 89 years old, and think about all the regrets you had in life about not taking the decisions you wanted to take or not saying what you wanted to say, and now open your eyes. It's like you have a second chance. And I embody that. I try my best to embody that, to live my life without any regrets in terms of taking risks. Of course I take risks. They're not reckless risks, they're calculated risks. But I'm young, and I'm full of energy, and I want to be able to move into my 30s, push through my 30s and my 40s, and have the energy and the mental youth to still get along with people, be able to connect with the younger folks in my family. And it's important for me to also see the world. I love to travel as well. It's regardless, I don't know how religious people are that are listening to your podcast, but it's like, for me, it's like, hey, it's my duty to almost see like the creation. I want to see what's going on, and I love to, I love to just stare up into the sky sometimes too, like look at the stars, and you feel so small but also big at the same time. Like they're all that fun stuff too that goes into the things I do in real estate, but that is real estate always comes first because that's what obviously pays the bill, but it's also exciting. But that's the stuff that keeps me sane and not talking about real estate all the time.
That's very nice. That's a lot of interest that you have on the side as well. So I'm very interested in the fact that you actually own a typewriter that's from the 80s, because that is something that a lot of people from our age group or even younger than us don't really think of having or owning right now, right? Like,
I know.
The kind of mindset we all have right now is, oh, if it's damaged or if it's old, then just replace it. But I'm like, no, what about you fix it and then you just keep it? So speaking of which, we actually have our first TV that we got in Dubai in 1993, still in our house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
My
That's
dad,
insane.
my sister,
Was it
and
like one of those
we
big box
voted.
ones?
No, it's not the big ones. It's like the Hitachi brand, and it's like
Oh,
a
yeah.
medium-sized one, and
Okay.
it's more like a showpiece right now in our house. And my mom wanted to get rid of it when we were moving out, but she was like, "Okay, we're gonna do a voting. Like, what are we gonna do with this?" And it was just 1 against 3, and we're like, "No, we're not letting go of our first TV." Like people need to see that this was our first TV. So it's a lot of
Of
fun.
course.
Like I love storing stuff as well. So like I have letters and like sticker albums from when I was in 6th grade. Like I still have those things, and I value those things because whenever I'm like
Of course.
not very busy, I go back to my drawer, I look at all of that, and I go like, wow, my friend actually hand painted a birthday card for me. So that's
Yeah.
and you know that's so mindful of someone to actually do that. So it's very nice.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for your time, for coming on
Of
the
course. Thank you for
podcast.
having me.
I hope this was, informative, and this was fun for you to talk about, because I know you love talking
course.
about everything real estate.
Yes, I do. Thank you for having me. And I hope that, people listening to it are also, they're curious about it. And I tell everyone the same thing. You can always reach me, call me,
Yes.
DM, text me, reach out on my social media. I have like 1 to 2 hours every single week that are just office hours. Like I just talk to people that have random questions for me that might be, that I won't directly benefit from whatsoever, right? And that's fine by me. I just want to be able to guide people, talk to people, help people, and allocate some time, and hopefully they'll be able to pay it forward to the next guy, because I know people have helped me in my journey. I'm not self-made whatsoever. I'm still going on my journey. I just want to be able to give back. So anyone that's listening to this that made it this far, please reach out, even if it's just like hey, I really liked your podcast, pretty cool. I think that'll definitely make my day.
Thank you so much. So on this
course.
note, we do come to the end of the episode today. Thank you so much for the viewers who have watched this episode. If there's any suggestion or feedback that you want to, send out, please email me at tasnimhassan.media@gmail.com. And on this note, we do come to the end of the episode with Close by Mo. This is it from me, Tasnim Hassan, signing off.